Hi there. So today, let me talk about Congo. So, according to the Congo president, he's criticizing the Kenyan president, the current Kenyan president, of having sabotaged Nairobi Process. So, if you go to the article, they are saying that the President Felix of Congo has criticized Kenyan President William Ruto for mishandling the Nairobi Process, which was designed to create dialogue with armed groups in eastern Congo. Tshisekedi accused Ruto of taking sides with Rwanda, a stance he believes has stalled the initiative. And the process for Nairobi Process was originally initiated by the former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta. It was aimed to support disarmament and demobilization effort, and basically that's why the Kenyan troops were there as part of ICRAF. They were there to observe disarmament. And initially it was working until Kenya went to the polls or elections and they voted for another president. And this new president came in, and the first thing he did was to undermine this process and other processes. And then we saw the Kenyan troops leaving Congo. And then we saw him actually aligning with Paul Kagame. And actually, the same month he was sworn in as president, saw a certain meeting between M23 group and another Congolese dissident group called led by former allies of the former president of Congo, Laurent Kabila. So one of them is Corneille Nangaa. He's the former chief of the electoral body in Congo called CENI, that is the Congo Electoral National something. And this Colonel Nangaa was claiming that Felix Tshisekedi needed to let him to continue looting Congo because he had 9 mines where they were extracting gold and cobalt in southeastern Congo. So when that was repossessed or naturalized back to the government, he got angry, got out of the country, went to Dubai, lived in Dubai, then came back to Kenya, and then he started causing up to this M23. They met in Nairobi. They formed this alliance called the Congo River Alliance, or also known as the Arrière Friou du Congo in French, and then Frive the Congo. I think Frive the Congo. I don't know. I don't speak French. But the point is, they formed this alliance, and then what? It was in Nairobi. They invited international journalists. It was covered in the media. It was pomp and colors. But the problem was this. M23 at the time, the leadership of M23 is still a sanctioned group by the United Nations Security Council. And it so happens Kenya was actually on the seat of the United Nations Security Council in 2022. And they're the ones who had passed the resolution to sanction M23. And here they are in Nairobi, in one of the largest hotels, giving public or rather press briefs to international journalists. And because the president of Kenya, William Ruto, allowed them to be there. So that was the first step of him undermining Congo. And he has continued to do so. And he has shown that he's aligned with Paul Kagame and so on. And this brings us to today's discussion that, and I want to warn you, if you're not, privy to what I want to say, you can leave at this point. But basically, I want to show you a map. This map, the pink region is where you find the Bantu people in Africa. And as you can see in Kenya, the south coast of Kenya, the coastal region of Kenya, the eastern part of Kenya, and the central part of Kenya is where you find mostly the Bantu people, among them the famous Kikuyus and the Kamba people. And the former president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, and the other one before him, Mwai Kibaki, come from the Kikuyu people. The Kikuyus in Kenya make up about, the last census was 2019, so they said there was 17% of the country's population, which is about what? 9 million, 10 million, 9 million. And Then they have their cousins, the Kamba, their other cousins, the Meru people. Together again, if you add the Kambas who make up about 3 to 4 million people, actually 4 million people in Kenya, and then you add the Meru who make about 3, and the other cousins, they almost make about 16 million of this country, of the Kenyan population, which is Kikuyus and their cousins. It's a very huge number. And then you add the Kisi and the Luyas, you find more than 60% of the country, of the people in Kenya being the Bantus. But then William Ruto is not a Bantu, he's a Nilot. And that's why he's causing up to Paul Kagame, because there have been an agenda by leaders or presidents in this region, mostly from non-Bantu community, to try to wrestle power from the Bantu people, because they claim, one, that the Bantu people are majority here. So if they follow the democratic way of voting, and don't forget, in Africa, we are still, not in Africa, the whole world still votes along religious and ethnic lines. You go to India, the Muslims will vote this way, the Hindus will vote that way, and then when you talk of ethnicity, the Urdu will vote this way in their local states, and the Punjab and the other Tamil people in the southern states will also vote different mayors and so on, despite them belonging to the same religion, for example. But they then go to the ethnicity. The Tamirs will vote for a Tamil candidate, and the Punjab will vote for a Punjab candidate. So those things are there everywhere. That's why I'm saying we are still that way. Humans identify that way. So democracy is that if you have a larger ethnic group in a region, their candidates are going to easily get voted in. If you have a larger religious group in a region, chances are the candidates of that religion are going to be voted in. So that's what happens. That's why you find northern Nigeria, despite so many groups, they vote for Muslims. The southern Nigeria, the southwestern Nigeria will vote for Christians, and so on. So these minority Nilotic people, the non-Bantus, found in mostly Bantu countries like Rwanda, like Kenya, they've tried to come up with a way that if we ever, by any chance, get a president who is not a Bantu, we try to work a way of trying to undermine the Bantus and retaining that power among non-Bantus. And that is what the Kenyan president is doing with Paul Kagame. So the first thing he did was to empower the Somali people. They are Nilotic, they are not Bantus. And the Somalis are known for their hatred of Bantus. They even say it themselves, if you ask them. So in Somalia, the southern part of Somalia, from this map you can see, we have a very small group of Bantu people. So in 1990s, Somalia, or the government of Somalia, was going through a civil war. And the civil war involved the larger Somali Cushitic clans or communities. The Bantus in Somalia were not fighting, they were not involved in the civil war. But one thing that was noted was that whenever these fighting clans, both of them, whether they were from the Ogaden clan or the Smora, the Marihan, the Isaac, Smora clans, whenever they came across the Bantus, they all did the same thing. They quickly killed the Bantus. The enemies, it's like, and this is also something happened. I read a book some time back that the French used to send their black fighters. The French took some soldiers from West Africa during the Second World War and took them to Europe to fight mostly the Italians and the Germans. And something was noted. Whenever white American soldiers or white British soldiers would come across these black French soldiers, they would shoot them. And whenever the Germans and the Italians would come across them, definitely they would shoot them. It never mattered which side came across the black soldiers. they were shot because they were black, not because they were fighting from whichever side. They never cared whether they are on our side or on the other side. On the other side, they just said, these are black soldiers in Europe, shoot them. So, or they would bomb them and pretend that it was by mistake. So it's the same thing that happened in Somalia in 1990s, that the warring clans would stop fighting, first of all, to deal with the Bantu, the common enemy, and then resume their fight. To a point that by 1990, the US identified the Somali Bantus, the Somali Bantu refugees who are running across the border into Kenya, and they heard their stories, and they gave them priority resettlement in 1990. If you read this article, let me try to look for a place where they were talking. If you read here, so if you read this line here, they are saying that in the late 1990s, the US government designated the ethnic Bantu people, that is from Somalia, as a priority for resettlement. It was then that the journey eventually leading them to go and live in Maine. Maine is a region in the US. So the first Somali refugees to leave the Kenyan camps in Dadaab to go to live in Canada and the US and Australia, they were the Somali Bantus. Because even in the Somali refugee camps there, they were being killed by their own comrades, or rather their own, compatriots, their own countrymen, compatriots. So you understand. Now, what William Ruto is doing in Kenya today, if you go to the internet, he was empowering the Somalis. So until recently, the Minister of Defense in Kenya, in charge of soldiers, was a Somali, despite the Somali being the minority group in Kenya in numbers. Then the chief of national intelligence, called NIS, is a Somali, and then the chief of the local intelligence, called DCI, which is like their version of FBI, is also a Somali, and the officers that are being promoted in those departments are also Somalis. And then last week, he restructured his cabinet, fired everyone, and then rehired them. And it was noted that Bantu ministers were not returned, most of them, that is. And in their place, he has added other Nilots from the opposition side. Now in Kenya, we had two groups that were going for the election. One side won, William Ruto's side. The other side lost, Raila Odinga. But now he's going to Raila Odinga's camp to get ministers because they are Nilots. So the agenda is to ensure that by the time he's finished, he leaves power to another Nilots. It's a design to ensure that the Kikuyus, the Kambas, and the other Bantus will never get power. The same thing is in Rwanda. You saw the election they did 2 weeks ago. Last week, we saw the president of Rwanda winning by 99.4%. The other two candidates who are Bantus from the Hutu communities, both of them never got even 1% of the votes. They got less than 1% together, together. Have you ever seen a democracy anywhere that involved a group of more than 50 people, and they had 3 candidates or 3 choices to make, and the one candidate wins by 99.5%, the other 2 candidates together don't even get 1%. Have you ever seen that? It has never happened. So it happened in Rwanda. And the people who are voting in Rwanda were supposed to be 8 million. And the other thing that is funny in Rwanda, their soldiers vote. It's the only country, or one of the few countries, that allows their military, their soldiers, to also vote. By voting, it means their soldiers have a certain outcome in mind. If their side or the side they support loses, they might take power by the gun. Soldiers, that's why soldiers should never vote. Because if they are supporting a certain candidate and the candidate loses, the outcome is known. So in Rwanda, the soldiers vote. The reason why they vote is because the minority group in Rwanda that is in power is the Tutsi people, who are less than 20% of the country. The other group being the Hutu, who are Bantus. They make up 85% of the population, and that was what was in their census last year, the one that they released, was it in October last year, 2023, yes? 13th October, 2023. So their census said that. And now this minority group, the Tutsi, to remain in power, they kind of use they use the soldiers and the police to oppress the people. And it happens that every male in the Tutsi community is somehow either in the police force or in the army, or a reserve soldier, someone who is trained and could be called up to basically fight. So every Tutsi male is ready to fight to make sure they stay in power. And because all their males, all the soldiers in Rwanda, most of them, 90% are Tutsi, so that they ensure that all the Tutsi vote, or any available Tutsi has to vote, they allowed the soldiers now to vote, so that it allows the Tutsis to all vote. And it's now a trend there. So that's what Félix Tshisekedi is trying to say, that William Ruto, who is a Nilot, came into power and quickly aligned himself with Paul Kagame and Museveni, and they have also trying to align themselves with the president of Somalia to try to form an Bantu power in the region. And the agenda is tyrannical. You should see what William Ruto is doing in Kenya, killing babies in the streets. And no one is talking about it. And so on and so on and so on. When Paul Kagame announced his phony results last week, that he had won by 99.4%, only 2 presidents in Africa congratulated him, because other presidents could see through the bullshit. And one of them, the first president to announce this charade, this joke of an election, was William Ruto. The other one, I don't know, no one knows. Even Yoweri Museveni didn't congratulate Paul Kagame because he knows that was not an election. Of course, Museveni himself doesn't do elections, but there's no need of wasting time and pretending that you're going to congratulate someone about a process that was not even a real process. So he never wasted his words, and that's what it was. So that's what I'm trying to say, that this map here, there's a conspiracy in this greater region to try to basically undermine the Bantu people. So if the president of Kenya was a Bantu, maybe the fighting in Congo would have reduced. And don't forget, as I end this video, last month, the UN Security Council released a report saying that this M23 is made up of 4,000 Rwandan troops. It's a report, and after research, they did their own investigation. So Rwandan troops are the ones who are fighting in Congo, pretending to be the M23. So even if the president of Kenya had managed, the former president of Kenya had managed to basically implement this Nairobi process, it would have been hard, because these are not Congolese people who are fighting there. Most of them are Rwandan soldiers. So how do you tell Rwandan soldiers to put down their guns? Unless you tell them to go back to their barracks, which is across the border. So it would still have been difficult to do that. Or maybe it could have been easy by just telling Paul Kagame to ask his troops to go back home. Maybe.